Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed participants, it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you Mr. Eddie Pitt. In the upcoming training session, Mr. Pitt will guide you through a comprehensive overview of the standard pre-need presentation. As you embark on this journey, you will delve into the psychology underpinning the presentation and gain insights into the purpose and significance of each page. I encourage you to relax and prepare to take thorough notes, as this session promises to be an enlightening experience. Should any queries arise, do not hesitate to seek clarification by reaching out to Mr. Pitt, whose expertise will undoubtedly enhance your understanding.
Death and dying, and we have the privilege to meet with people who have recently attended a funeral, then our closing ratio is much higher than what most insurance agents have the privilege of experiencing. And then our ability to capture leads and to be able to present people is much higher. One of the things that we do know from the insurance industry is that we got people who are paying maybe $30 for a lead, $15, even if you pay $5 for the lead, and the people hang up on you. It's like, okay, really? When we tie in the funeral homes and the people who are already grieving and have suffered death, then our closing ratios go up and our numbers of presentations go up. So the one thing that we want to make certain that everybody who's a part of what we're doing have the capability of doing is being comfortable as they present the information. It's a foolproof method. It's a very simple and not complicated presentation. But the psychology of this presentation means more than anything else. So the presenter has to understand their position when they're talking to someone about pre-arrangement. So let's look at the presentation now. When we come into the home, and you guys have the dialogue that go with this, but I don't want to go specifically with the dialogue because you can study that and put it into your own words. But I want to talk a little bit about the presentation itself and what it means to the people that we're talking to. So as you walk into the home, this page here is open. This is your first page. And you'll say something to the effect, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, I want to thank you for inviting me into your home this evening. My purpose is to be of service to you and your family and to answer any questions that you might have regarding a family's final emergency. Thank you for welcoming me into your home. It's your introduction. Now, if you're online, I want to thank you for inviting me into your home in this virtual manner. And I want to congratulate you for being able to make this connection. In this virtual world that we live in today, a lot of people are having problems making the adjustment. And I'm pleased that you all were able to meet with me here this evening. And I look forward to being able to share this information with you. I want to be certain that you have a good understanding as we go forward. Please stop me if you have questions as we go on. Because as many people, when you have a question, it's kind of difficult to go farther if the question is not answered. And that's why I'm here today. Now, as I go further into the presentation that has been designed for you all for TW Parks, first of all, my credentials. And I feel that it would be important for you to maybe take a screenshot here, because in this day and time that we live in, a lot of things are uncomfortable if you're like me. I don't open certain emails. I don't click on certain things, but this is who I am. My name is Eddie Pitt. There's my producer number, 453-558. And I'm speaking to you today on behalf of TW Parks Memorial Garden. Sharon over at TW Parks put this program together simply so that families will have an opportunity to look at what the future would be like if a death were to occur in the family. We all know that one day we're going to pass. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, I commend you on having the conversation today, but we don't know when it will be. But we do know there's some responsibilities around the loss. So now I digress, right? For you guys, we're training. Did you see what just happened?
Yeah, you relaxed.
Right.
You
Right.
pretty much got them relaxed. Who, you got that out the way. Who am I? You get your credentials up and you offer some information. And I believe you open up their attention to like something that has already happened, seeing that they never knew, never been through a funeral before and what it really entails. So you open that up. They're open, I believe.
Yeah, we're about to have this conversation, and we have to remember in the death care from our position, this conversation is one that we have every day. But for families, this is a very uncomfortable subject. So it's important that we warm up with them, give them a chance to kind of calm down and realize that we're not the Grim Reaper. So that's the position that we take in the house. So now as we move farther into the presentation, we go simply into this next page. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, there are a couple of reasons why Sharon and the gang over at TW Parks put the program together. And one of them is because so many families have never discussed the subject. Many people have never taken 10 or 20 minutes to talk about what would happen or what they would like to have happen if something were to happen to them. Let me ask you, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, have you all ever had that conversation on what you would want if something were to happen to you? You see what just happened? And you have to realize that now we're in a presentation, and as we go through the presentation, you have things that you're going to say, but your responsibility is probably 30% of the conversation, because 70% of this conversation should be from the family because you're getting feedback. Now, remember this, as you go through a presentation, you don't want to go through by yourself. They have tie downs. Would you agree? Do you think that makes sense? Things of that nature that brings the family along with you through the presentation. One thing we know for sure, if you go through the whole presentation and you're the only one talking, when you get to the end of the presentation, then you're at the end of the presentation by yourself. So remember that you need to have the family go with you through this presentation by connecting with them and allowing them to communicate and ask questions. So when I ask the question, have you ever discussed it? I want to know, have you ever talked about it? And then one of the family members, I mean, in most cases, it'll be the wife. She'll say, well, something like, well, he said, throw him in the backyard and put a bone out or something like that. And then you get a chance to actually open this can of worms. Well, Mr. Davis, let me ask you, we've heard a lot of guys say that you can just throw them out in the backyard. But God forbid, if something were to happen to you before something happened to your wife, then she would be left with the responsibilities. Now, that is not something that you would really want to just leave on her, and she's not going to be able to throw you out in the backyard, would you? And then he'll say something like, I was joking and whatnot, because he was avoiding the conversation. Well, guess what? We're having the conversation. And all we have to do is realize our place in this conversation. So now after we go through a little dialogue with that, and we've also found out the second reason is that many people have never had to make these arrangements. Let me ask you, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, have you ever been responsible for taking care of someone's funeral arrangements? Most people have not been bound with that responsibility. And if one of them have had that responsibility, we're getting closer emotionally where we would like to be. Because the individual who took care of those responsibilities remember the emotional place that they went to, and they also remember the challenges that they experienced. And I don't really care who you are. There were challenges to take care of arrangements for a death of a loved one. And if they have never had to make those arrangements, then now is the time when we make it a little clear on what this encompasses. And we show them the burden that's associated with taking care of arrangements. I'm going to stop here for a few minutes. Training. Terrellyn, what do you feel in this page here, these reasons, as we go forward?
Say that again, the reasons?
What do you feel about this page? What do you think is what speaks to you most about this page?
On the page. Okay. So many have never, because so many have never discussed the subject, many have never had to make an arrangement. Yeah, so you're speaking to really the whole conversation, but this is, you're breaching the subject. You're making them think about really their own mortality.
There we have.
Um and you're getting into that. If they have not ever made an arrangement of this sort, you're going to take them into that. You're going to take them into making that arrangement, either for someone else, or hopefully they're talking to, they're in the on the Zoom or in the presentation with a loved one that may be taking care of them when they pass.
Well said.
So yeah, so you actually got them on the journey to making an arrangement.
Right. Well said. Well said, Carolyn. Thank you. Now, when we go into the next page, we get a little deeper. And the presentation is designed by psychologists and other people who really studied human psychology. You know, how do I get to, I hate to say, how do I get into this thick head? How do I get this information in here? You know, because before we started this conversation with this family, it's important to understand that they have a dozen or more problems or challenges on their plate. They have a dozen or more things that's in their front of mind. They're worried about the kids. They're worried about their job. They're worried about finances. They're worried about their house. They're worried about cleaning. They're worried about transportation. All of these things are going on before I come. So I have to move those priorities and make this the number one priority. So the first few pages that we went through, what those pages did was set the stage and kind of clear the mind, open the mind. So now we're delving a little deeper. Let me ask you, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, God forbid if there was a death in your family yesterday, what would you be doing today? And shut up. Oh, I don't know. I don't know what I would do. Most of them would say something like that. I don't really know what I would be doing. I know it would be a crazy time right now. Good God Almighty, I don't know. So we go from there right into the next page. I'm sure you would agree there would be a lot of things to do. In fact, we listed a lot of the separate details that would be responsible. You know, someone has to gather the vital statistics. Someone has to make cemetery arrangements. Someone must make funeral arrangements, collect the legal documents, people that need to be notified, and even worse, the bills to be paid. And then future plans need to be thought out. You know, what will the future look like, Mrs. Davis, if Mr. Davis is no longer here? The responsibility that he took on doing life, the things that you didn't have to worry about. How do you take those on? How do you move on? These are some of the things that are thought about as we talk about what needs to be done and what challenges could be avoided. You know, the first area of responsibility, when we look at the whole totality of this program, gathering the vital statistics, that is taken care of by this guide that we're going to give you today. The Family Emergency Record Guide will give you a chance to write those decisions down, make those decisions, and let family members know exactly where the important documents are. Someone has to arrange and pay for the funeral service, the mortuary of their choice, and someone has to pay for the final resting place, whether it be cremation, whether it be traditional ground burial. But the first area will be taken care of with the Emergency Record Guide. So now, guys, as you see for training, we're training again. These are the things that's got to be done, you know, and most people avoid the thought of this all the time. But now we're talking about moving toward getting this done. And we're really now talking about getting it done at no cost. What we're talking about now don't cost anything. You got a free guide where you'll be able to sit down and start talking about your wills and everything else. Now, this is what we offer the family. But then again, this emergency record guide is to help them think more about the things that they have not thought about. And I don't know, you don't know when you visit with the family if they have separate checking accounts. You don't know if they have separate records or they have hidden families. So many things that you don't know. So many things you don't want to know. But at the same time, if they're in a loving relationship, then somebody will get a chance to hear, start to give the information that's needed to fill this book out, or it's going to start an argument. I'm telling you right now. So let's look a little farther here at the emergency record guide. In your presentation, this will be linked on this page. So the first thing you'll do, you'll click on that and you'll go right into the emergency record guide for that family. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, you're going to get a copy of this guide, and this guide is designed to help you all start to pull your affairs together. Wills and important documents. One of the first questions is, have you all actually prepared your will yet? Do you know 8 out of 10 people are going to say they have not prepared their will? We don't proclaim to be attorneys or lawyers, but you can get a will kit online for free. Matter of fact, if necessary, I'll mail you one or email you one, and you can make your wishes known, get it notarized, and it becomes a legal and binding document. There are so many issues that a family suffers if they don't have a will regarding their estate, their house, their children, and things of that nature. So we suggest that each of our families take an opportunity to take advantage of finding out what's necessary to complete their will. I mean, we even go into details now. Okay, hold on. We're going into details about insurance policies, birth, marriages, tax returns, diplomas, military papers. All of those important papers are listed and where they can be found. And Mr. and Mrs. Davis, we talk to a lot of families, and so many of us are busy with life that a lot of these things seem to be overlooked. And there are things that need to be left in order so that, God forbid, if something were to happen to one of you, that the other can continue in the lifestyle that you prepare for one another. So all of those documents, you'd make a checklist. Which of those documents do you have in place, and which ones do you need to organize and kind of seal off so that it's prepared for the family? Insurance policies. There are thousands and thousands of dollars in insurance policies that are never collected every year because somebody did not know that the insurance policy even existed. Uncle Buck bought the insurance policy years ago. He put it under the pillow. Somebody threw the pillow away, and nobody knows. By completing the record guide, you're certain that any benefit that the family is entitled to, that they're able to receive those benefits. Look at the bank accounts. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, is none of our business, but a lot of families have separate accounts. They got things that are going on that they might not be making readily available to the family. But most people, if God forbid something were to happen to them, they will want those proceeds to go to their family. So in filling out the personal protection guide, it gives you an opportunity to write this down. You may have separate copies of the guide with the personal information in it. And then you just let someone know where those guides are. Let them know that it exists so that, God forbid, if something happened, they can access this information. Okay, stop. Training.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. Question, Delbert here. That you said at this point we will have this at our disposal where we can click on it.
Yes. In your presentation,
they got it.
Right. You'll just click on that and it pops up in your presentation, and you go through this as a part of the presentation. Okay. And when you wipe out of this, you come back to the presentation.
It's not on this one though, right?
No, it's not on the one that you have there. Because
right.
What you have is associated with my computer. You're going to get those files, and you'll download those files into your computer. And when you're working on your computer, you'll be able to access this document.
Got you.
Carolyn? You're on mute, Carolyn.
Hey, I can hear you.
Okay. Did you have any questions up until now?
No, not so far. I'm about to show my face in a minute. I had to get to the point where I could settle down where I am. But no, I don't have any so far.
Okay, good, good. But as you can see here, very evident when you look at families who have been running, gunning, and doing everything that they do on a daily basis with their business, their children, their lives, a lot of families have not taken a close look at this. So we're public servants. I mean, we're bringing a service into that family because there's nobody who would not agree that a family needs to have this information logged so that if something happened, I mean, come on, Facebook accounts, all that kinds of stuff. Somebody needs to be able to access that information. And that's what this guide is all about. The personal statistics for the husband and the wife. Where you're from, where the family from, the city, county, place above, what's your mother's maiden name, so what school did you attend, what organizations were you a part of, all of these things that would be used for an obituary. It's a challenge to search this information when you got a couple of days and to try and perform a service for a deceased loved one. So when we lend the credence to this document, then what we're doing is a service. Because right now, this isn't serious. But because we came into their life, now we're giving them this optimism that it doesn't have to be the mystery that it is for so many people. You don't have to be that story that so many people have about how crazy things got at a funeral. Were you a veteran? Your DD 214 papers, the Veterans Administration, the benefits that are available through the veterans, those documents, the DD 214 number, and all of that is left in this book. There are many veterans, they served their time, wounded, and all the things that went along with being in service, but they might not even have that documentation around. Some veterans don't even talk about that anymore because it was such a tragic experience. But they still deserve to have the honors that come with serving the country. So it's our obligation to help the family be able to accomplish this. The wife's personal information, where she was, the veteran benefits, all of these things, Social Security. A lot of people still think that Social Security will take care of a funeral. Come on, $255. That's all you get. That's all you get. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, and this is how you apply for those benefits. You're not going to have you're not even going to get a limousine for that price. But if it's due you, then you qualify to get those monies. The financial status. When I talk about separate bank accounts, it's not our personal business for the family, but you just share, your assets for the family. I mean, there's some families that have rental properties and all kinds of things and investments that the family don't really know about. And then when they need these monies most, when it means the most to them, they're not able to access it. So all of a sudden, it's not only a loss when you died, but the family lost the income. So the income is lost, and now they're not able to access benefits that they're entitled to. There's a dark period there that no man would want to leave on his family. No woman would want to leave that on their children and kids. And this is how we take care of that, making sure that everything is accounted for. The assets, yes, and the liabilities. They could be many. The family financial status. We go into securities and accounts and all real estate on payables. All of these things matter. And then people to be contacted. Children. Oh man, as we go through this in the book, you guys, I just throw this out there for training, but you got illegitimate children out there. You got brothers and sisters that the wife don't know. You got other relatives and stuff. God forbid if the person died, those people need to know. So by filling out this personal protection guide, you write those names down so those people can be contacted. How many names do you have right now, Miss Davis, of your husband's friends, cousins, uncles, children that you would contact if something happened to him? And she'll say, da, da, da. Mr. Davis, let me ask you, how many of your wife's friends and family members, phone numbers and contact information do you have? You're going to find a weakness in that. You're going to find a weakness. And this is the solution to it. Just write it down. Key people to contact, doctors, lawyers, people who have significant relationships with the family. Those people need to be contacted too. children and other relatives, friends and advisors. As we just can't simply go through the book, memorial instructions. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, of most importance, what type of final disposition would you prefer? Would you want to be cremated? Would you want to have a traditional ground burial? Would you rather be placed in a mausoleum? These decisions are decisions that you guys can make in advance. They're decisions that don't have to be left until the last minute because everybody have their personal wishes and they are what they are. And we simply say, just make the family aware of it. Would you want to be resuscitated? God forbid if you were on death's door. Would you want to be resuscitated or would you rather just go on? Everybody's choice is different for those scenarios. And everybody needs to know what your choice is, Mr. Davis. What do you want? Mrs. Davis, what do you want? Let me ask you, Mr. Davis, if something were to happen to you, would you want to go on life support? Would you rather go through life resuscitation? I mean, not to just generally speak about how they break people ribs, trying to give them artificial respiration. Would you want to be a part of that? Or would you rather just, like some people say, go on to the heavens? Those are decisions you guys make together and you talk about it and you become comfortable with it. Because I tell you one thing for sure, if Mrs. Davis decide to cremate you, Mr. Davis, and not have a service, if the kids haven't heard anything about that, if nobody knows that that was your wish, and she's trying to, there could be family members who have a problem with that. And the one challenge that persists with situations like that is that it's not the death, it's not the funeral, it's not that process, it's next week, it's next month. The division that something like that causes in the family. Most people don't leave that on their family if they have a choice to do something different. The wife's instructions, your living will, your living will, those directives, I've talked a little bit about them, but what do you want to have happen while you're still here and you're maybe incapacitated and you can't take care of yourself? You got a chance to make all of those decisions in advance of time, your personal life. And I mean, we could go on and on with this booklet, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, even with the organ donation and things of that nature. But there's a letter left to our loved ones. And in this booklet that you get, when they get this book, they'll find a letter from you all that says, because of our love for you and for each other, we have completed this personal planning organizer. Our sincere desire is to relieve you from anxiety, expense, and inconvenience at the time of our death. We have made our cemetery and funeral arrangements in advance so that you would not be forced to make these sudden and costly decisions on a day already filled with sorrow. It is especially important that we let you know how gratified we feel that we have been able to make these decisions. We know you are now protected against the loss of insurance, government benefits, and personal possessions that we want you to have. Our estate, now being in order, gives us peace of mind. With these arrangements completed, we know they will help you keep alive the warm and tender memories of the time that we've all had together with our warmest thoughts and love. And you all sign this to your family. Mr. Davis, this has been considered one of the strongest love letters to a wife that could ever be written. Mrs. Davis, the same for you. On the day that you passed, we don't know who's going to go first, but to know that this is done, that's a major benefit for the family. Now okay, back to.
We got this letter?
Huh?
We got this letter, Ed?
Come on, yeah, you got that letter. Yeah. Okay. This is a pre-need funeral presentation, and I'll tell you guys, it's not reinvented, but what it does is give the family that you're talking to the best opportunity to make a wise decision. And that wise decision is to do it now, not to wait till tomorrow, not to say I need to pray about it, not to say I need to talk to my lawyer, I need to talk to the wise decision is to do it now. So when we go a little farther, the significant events that happen in our life, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, they all require planning. You know, nobody gets married right away without planning. You don't have children without planning in most cases. You don't graduate without having plans for the graduation. You don't take a vacation without planning a vacation. The decisions you all make today regarding final arrangements are decisions that will have a profound and lasting effect on your family in the future. When we look at these pictures, we look at a cemetery that's not properly taken care of, and we look at a funeral home, a limousine or a hearse that might not be up to date. And then over to the right, we see a beautifully manicured cemetery. We see a beautiful location, such as T.W. Parks. You know, the saddest part about it is that families who wait until the last minute, they can pay more money to be buried at a cemetery that's not properly taken care of, or a funeral establishment that's not properly taken care of, as opposed to having some of the finest arrangements that are available. The advantages that we have in pre-need are very significant. When we look at the protection that we already pay for, you get insurance for your house, your car, fire insurance. We don't know if anything's going to happen to your house. We don't know if something's going to happen to your car, if your house is going to be burglarized. But we do know death is inevitable. When we pay so much money for all of this insurance and protection already, Mr. and Ms. Davis, let me ask you, doesn't it make sense to pay for something that's inevitable? That's a tie-down question. Now, who's going to say it don't make sense? Come on, we're training. Now we're training. Who's going to say it doesn't make sense to pay for the inevitable? And most of the families you talk to, they do have some fire insurance and some automobile insurance and some house insurance. They're already paying these things. If we can get them a plan that's affordable, they're going to pay a lot less to take care of their final arrangements. That's what we stand for, and that's why we're there. And that's the authority that we have. That's why our closing ratio is so high when we look at our funeral products. Again, people pay $30, $40 for leads and even more. When we have family that just went to a funeral, we have somebody who just had somebody die, and we're in their house. We're having this opportunity through the privilege of the funeral home that we're associated with. So all we have to do is be professional and do our job. The next page, and you got the literature on this and the verbiage, but Mr. and Mrs. Davis, there are only two ways that a family take care of arrangements such as this when the death of a loved one's occur. The wrong way is at the time of a death. You know, when there's so much indecision, the haste, the worry, the grief, the uncertainty, almost intolerable stress, in addition to the possibility of emotional overspending. We find that people spend so much more at the last minute because all they say, I want to do the best I can for him. I want to do the best I can for her. And so many of those families are almost destitute a month, year later after that death occurred. Because again, they didn't realize that not only did they lose a loved one, but they lost an income. So this affects the family traumatically. So we're now bringing this to light so the family can experience this without the emergency of it all. And Mr. and Mrs. Davis, then the other way is the right way. It's what we consider the wise, the economical, and the loving way to take care of these arrangements, which is in the comfort of your home. You know, you have the security today of making economical decisions that are affordable for the family in the comfort of your home. Nobody's sick, nothing's pressing. When we look at what you're going to pay, we can't change or affect what people are paying for final arrangements. When we look at a grave, the low cost, $900, people pay as high as $3,000, $4,000 for one grave. You can get vaults or liners for $900. They can go to $15,000. Memorials from 16 to 18, opening and closing, caskets. We look at the low cost. It's about $13,000 when you look at cemetery and funeral together, if you don't choose cremation. And on the high side, we have $78,950. You can go so much higher than that. You know, you can go with the Aretha Franklin funeral where you use all the highest cost things that are involved. $250,000 funerals. Those who have the money, there's nothing wrong with investing that type of money in the funeral. If you've earned the right to be there, we're all for that. But for families who are struggling and don't have that money, it's ridiculous to spend the money that people are paying for funerals when they could have done something different. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. and Mrs. Davis? Let's look at inflation. Today, we know what the cost is. On the minimum side is $13,000. That's this year. With 10% inflation, somewhere between 5 and 7 years, that cost is going to double. So we can use 7 years. In 7 years, it's 26,000. 7 more years is 53,000. At 2058, I think I'll be about 100 years old. It's for $500,000. You know, most people look at figures like this and they say that could never be real. When we look back now at the figures from 2000, it was only $6,000 in the averages that we were using for this comparison. But as time has gone on, inflation has affected these products and everything that's going on in this industry. And it doesn't matter how you feel about what it costs. When a death occurs, you encounter the experience. Beg, borrow, or steal, it has to be paid for before a funeral can take place. And we don't go into all the details about how bodies were thrown on the ground and how people didn't take care of it and how the remains were held hostage in the funeral home because they didn't pay the money and things of that nature. We don't have to go that far, but some people may open that conversation, and you need to know that that's real. But Mr. and Mrs. Davis, T.W. Parks Colonial Chapter, what Sharon and her team has done over there allows you to freeze the cost. So you don't worry about what inflation is. They put some package programs together. They have the Sovereign, the Revelation, and the Essential. And then they have various cremation choices that are being made available. It's on the premise of good, better, best. So the Sovereign program, right now they've locked that in for families who prearrange at a total of $14,995. And that includes 2 limousines and the top line caskets, whether you choose wood or one of the 18 gauge caskets. The family has the opportunity to select the flowers, and everything is included with the Sovereign. That's what some people call the King's package. Now, the next package, hold up. Previous. Next package is the Revelation. And the Revelation also includes the 18 gauge caskets, but not the wooden, 1 limousine, the flowers, and everything that's necessary to complete the funeral services at $1,250. And then they have the Essential. They say good, better, best. The Essential is considered to be a good program. It takes care of what the family needs to take care of the funeral services. Everything is done. It comes with one of our 20 gauge 9-sealer caskets. The limousine is provided, all the professional services of the funeral home. And then the cremation options, whether you're going to have direct cremation, the cremation package, or the cremation with a visitation and funeral service, those options are the ones that you make. But let me ask you, Mrs. Davis, what type of farewell would you want? What do you see being the final package that you would select for yourself? Would it be the Sovereign, the Essential, the Revelation, or were you thinking cremation? Guys, was that fun? Was that fun or what?
On a journey here. We're on a journey.
I mean, when you talk with the family about the wisdom and the logic of prearranging, you just need to have your little ducks in a row. So you got to do a little studying, and you don't have to know everything. Remember that. You don't have to know everything because you got your flip charts, you got the pages, you got the conversation. And from here, you just go straight to ELCO. We have the advanced planning programs, the final expense, and we have those pre-need programs, which is what we use to determine what the family's going to pay. They can answer no questions or they can answer 2 questions. They get 1 product. They're going to get a product that's already approved with no physicals and no questions, or they're going to get product that they get that goes through underwriting based on their questions. Real simple. So it doesn't matter what your health scenario is, you're going to get protection. And then you look at the scenario with what the finances are going to be. We got 3, 5, and 7-year financing. And we also have a 10-year finance program. So they can pay this 10 years. Now, when you stretch your program out for 10 years, they have actually paid for the cost of the program 10 years and they're done with it. So a 60-year-old, by the time they're 70, their final arrangements are paid for. If they get a five-year program, by the time they're 65, the program is paid for. But obviously, if they have a 10-year pay, 5-year, 7-year, or 3-year pay plan, they're going to pay more than what they would pay if they paid until they were 100 years old. So when you do the financing for the family, you work out the contracts and the details on how much that monthly investment is going to be. If they can't afford a 10-year pay program because it's too high, then now you go to your final expense. Simple. Just get them a comparable final expense program that will take care of the needs for the funeral. And you also inform them that this is not guaranteed. This is not inflation proof. So if you want the sovereign, that would be $12,000. I'm going to suggest you get $20,000 in this final expense program. Follow me? So they got $20,000. Most likely they're going to have enough to cover the funeral. But when they buy the pre-need, the advantage is the pre-need program freezes the cost of the funeral. And the pre-need program is what we do for our funeral homes. When we lock the pre-need program in for our funeral homes, it guarantees that they're going to get growth on that policy and they're going to have enough money to pay for that funeral when that death occurs. And it 80% guarantees that they're going to have that funeral. And you may not know, but some families choose a different funeral home later on. Well, if you got a funeral home that ain't doing what they're supposed to do, if they kind of lose their footing, then the family need to be able to get their investment taken care of. So that's real simple, but that's based on logistics. So when we put the program in place, there's not a lot of mention of transferring policies and all that kind of stuff. You bought this policy for T.W. Park's funeral home. And they've given you allowances and costs, and they've guaranteed that when death occurs in your family, just like when they did it for your mother, just like when they took care of services for your father, your grandmother, your uncle, and your aunt, they're going to take care of your services, and the burden will not be left on your family. I'll leave this open for questions, comments, and then we're going to get on off the phone. We got it recorded. There's the presentation. The verbiage is there for you to study and to use your own words. But the only way that you get to this is by flipping through those presentation pages and starting to talk. You might talk to your dog. You might talk to your cat. You might talk to your children. And you might even give it to your husband or your wife presentation. But kind of get comfortable giving the presentation.
As we conclude this enriching training session, we extend our gratitude to Mr. Eddie Pitt for providing us with a comprehensive understanding of the standard pre-need presentation. Armed with newfound knowledge of the presentation psychology and the rationale behind each page, you are now better equipped to serve our community with distinction. Remember, your success is not limited to this training room. Feel free to reach out to Mr. Pitt or dedicated team at Cooper Professionals for any further guidance or questions that may arise as you apply this knowledge in your role. For ongoing support and resources, do not hesitate to contact us at 312-442-443 or explore our website at www.cooperaprofessionals.com. Your dedication to excellence and commitment to serving our community reflect the values that make us proud to have you as a part of the Cooper Professionals team.